Spiceheads, it's Emily with Spiceworks. Thanks for tuning in today and joining us on another Spiceworks partner webinar, a new solution to an old problem, how to manage legacy data, brought to you by Iron Mountain. Before we get started, I want to remind everyone this webinar is being recorded. If you have to step away for any reason, you will get an email with a link to the video in about a week. Also, there's a Q&A box on your screen to the left, and I encourage you to submit your questions at any time during this presentation. If we're not able to get to your question live, someone will be able to follow up with you. As usual, we also have a live chat, so join in by clicking the blue widget at the bottom of your screen. Now, let's get started. Today's presenters are John Sharp, Director of Product Management with Iron Mountain, and Chris Clark, President and CEO of Trusted Data Solutions. So, John, whenever you're ready, take it away.
Thanks very much, Emily, and thanks everyone for taking the time to listen to the webinar today. As Emily said, I'm John Sharp, Director of Product Management for the data management business within Iron Mountain, and I'm joined here with Chris Clark, who's the Chief Executive Officer of Trusted Data Solutions, or TDS. Iron Mountain and TDS have a long history going way back of partnering to help customers address some pretty difficult data management challenges, especially when it comes to restoring legacy data from aging media. So we're excited to share some of our collective observations today and also recommendations for this space. We believe it's critical for both IT and legal to be involved when it comes to data management planning. So I'll start with a brief introduction to Iron Mountain and explain where our data management perspective really comes from. Just at a high level, we manage information for about 94% of the Fortune 1000. We have more than 18,000 data management customers globally. I think we're in 41 countries or 45 countries. We have a very, very good geographical footprint, so we see a lot of different things in different geographies and different industries. We've been a trusted partner with many customers for decades, so we've seen evolving data management needs across financial, legal, healthcare, manufacturing, entertainment, and what have you. We've helped customers adapt their programs over that time, and obviously we've adapted our approach and our capabilities to meet those requirements as well. So between basically our broad and deep experience, our top quality logistics and service, and our true focus on data protection, we really understand data management best practices, and again, we're excited to share some of those today. So I mentioned that Iron Mountain has a strong focus on data management and data protection. Let me talk a little bit about our lifecycle approach. In order to match up with how many of our customers view their IT operations, we basically look at a lifecycle that goes from backup and recovery through archiving, restoration, and even asset disposition at end of life. So what does that mean? It means we rotate and store tapes for backup and disaster recovery. We provide cloud services in those areas as well as more and more companies and organizations are looking towards alternate backup and recovery mechanisms. We see more and more organizations developing dedicated archiving strategies, so we're also helping there. And again, finally, when IT assets reach end of life, it's really important both from a security perspective and an environmental perspective that they're disposed of or recycled or remarketed in the right ways. So we're also trying to help customers in that area. But really today, I'll bring your attention to the red box or the red circle or oval on the screen. We really want to focus the discussion on restoring data from legacy tapes and systems. This is a very common problem for both IT and legal, especially in highly litigious and regulated industries like financial services, healthcare, and others. So data restoration is where Iron Mountain and TDS have years of combined perspective, and this is where we'll deep dive. But before we get into the meat of the presentation today, we wanted to go with a quick poll question to see some of the events and changes that are occurring in the organizations of the listeners. So we have a poll question. Is your organization going through one or more of the following technology changes? And the choices are migrating to the cloud, moving to a new backup software or environment, have you done M&A, or are you consolidating servers or data centers? So we'll give about a minute and ask the people on the other end of the webinar to please give it your best answer. Good. All right, so we've moved on to the results page here. So what do we have? We see that the winner looks like, I forgot the other, I didn't see the other two choices. So I missed two choices. In fact, I missed the winner. So decommissioning old infrastructure is actually 31.6%, followed by moving to new backup software or environment. So that actually fits in quite perfectly for what we're going to talk about further in the presentation. Those are really some of the events, and I'll ask Chris to jump in here too, but those are really some of the events that you often find yourself in this problem of having to go back and have a repeatable system for finding the old data as you do this stuff. So that's great. So to jump into the rest of the presentation here, again, the results on the previous poll actually really validate what we're going to talk about. So you see that backup hardware and software change, as well as decommissioning infrastructure, are two of the trigger events that we have seen repeatedly over years with our customers for having challenges getting the data back. So it's really any time you're moving to a new technology or you're experiencing a big change in your business, when it really will benefit you to have planned ahead for the old data. So the new stuff is fun and exciting, and if you're moving to the cloud or doing something totally different, T equals 0 and forward is exciting, but it's really kind of a problematic thing when a lot of organizations forget to think about the data that was created last week or last year or 5 years ago. So we definitely see this problem being pervasive and something we can help with. So with that, I'd like to hand over to Chris. What Chris has done is put together some scenarios of what good looks like in terms of planning and what bad looks like, and he's going to take us through those. So Chris?
Thank you, John, and good afternoon, everybody, and thank you for taking the time to join us. Just a real quick thing about Trusted Data Solutions and our partnership with Iron Mountain. We've been around, we've been helping customers convert from legacy platforms since the early 1980s. We were helping people get off of Wang to WordPerfect back in the day, and after years and years and years of work, we can kind of tell you that there's nothing new in IT. The idea of moving to new technologies is nothing new. It's happening more rapidly now, where there's a lot of pressure on efficiencies and cost savings and everything else. But the need to be able to reach back and still access older information via older systems has always been around. Our specialty is dealing with backup tapes and being able to access backup tapes from basically anything that's been commercially available over the past 30 years. Everything from we do everything from 9-track reels, punch cards, all the way up through to the latest LTO technologies. But we also do a lot of work in the email archive space and also other types of data like voice loggers and things like that, where we're able to retrieve that information using our own tools and techniques. So we've seen it all, and what we do with Iron Mountain is we help our customers, help provide access to that information. Because one of the things that we've seen consistently is, as IT folks, we're always focusing on the today and the tomorrow, and and the technology changes that are helping us become more efficient as we go forward, or more effective as we go forward. And one of the things that happens is the business, whether it's the legal people or the compliance people or or just whatever we refer to as the business, still has a need to be able to retrieve information from before the latest technological change. So that's kind of where we live on a daily basis. So one of the things I'm going to talk to you about, or a couple of things I'm going to talk to you about, are some horror stories, so just to give you a sense of where things can go dramatically wrong. The first is a well-known hotel chain that we do quite a lot of work for that had an outsourced a vendor that was providing all of their outsourced IT services, and they were bringing all their Exchange and mail in-house, so they were insourcing it, taking it over. A lot of time and attention were put into the new environments that the company was then going to be managing themselves. They were going to be backing up with a totally new backup software. They were on the outsourcer was on a TSM environment with Exchange, and a lot of time and effort was put into the essentially the cutover, so they could be going forward on a go forward basis. They had a reliable service. We were asked by the client to come in and provide a solution where we could possibly access the older information for them, so they didn't have to rebuild rebuild a legacy environments just so they could maintain capability. So they brought us in. The problem was that we were brought in after this cutover had taken place, and the big, nobody had actually thought about how do we properly decommission and preserve all this information, including the catalogs and all the targeting information. So the customer inherits a bunch of tapes, and there was literally no access to the TSM database because it had been decommissioned and destroyed. So the customer had a lot of tapes and literally no way to recover them. With TSM specifically, there's no good way to catalog TSM tapes because there's no cataloging information that resides on the tape. If you lose the database, you lose it all. So this customer literally went from, literally has completely inaccessible data from before they did this change from the IT outsourcer, and it's caused them quite a bit of legal issues and other things just because nobody thought about how they safely decommission and preserve that information. Normally when we come into a situation like this much earlier where we're helping them before they turn everything off, we maintain, we make sure all the, the catalogs are preserved, encryptions are preserved, all the encryption is preserved, everything like that before they actually pull the plug. But this is a level where this had real material effect on the business and caused quite a bit of consternation. And in reality, the IT guys didn't do anything wrong from the standpoint of their focus was their primary mission was setting up the system on a go-forward basis. It kind of the task of making sure this the information they were inheriting was retrievable literally fell between two stools. And one of the things that in the end the customer was extremely nobody was very happy with the outcome of this particular problem. And but it does go to show you that you have to kind of think about there's more to think about than just what am I doing on a go forward basis, but really have a plausible decommissioning plan because somebody is going to inherit this data and the responsibility to retrieve this data on and on. This is, like I said, this has caused quite a bit of heartache in that organization. The next excuse me. The next example I wanted to touch on was a pharmaceutical company that we worked in that was highly acquisitional. And so they had acquired multiple companies over the years, and some of these companies had open litigation cases or preservation hold cases where lots of tapes were preserved because they may be relevant in some type of either, I think in this case it was a class action type litigation, and there were over 30,000 backup tapes. The company that our client, who had inherited or acquired this business, kind of inherited and acquired the obligation to be able to retrieve this information. The only problem was, again, no catalogs or databases or literally any records of what were on these tapes was preserved. And in this particular case, the client was in a real pickle because they still had an obligation to respond to litigation and requests. And they had to come to us, and we literally had to re-catalog 30,000 tapes to be able to find, and more than that, in a deeper level, map all the custodians and all of the other server file level detail, so we could then provide a map so they could respond to litigation. This caused it cost them quite a bit of money, but it also cost them quite a bit of time, which actually resulted in sanctions and other legal penalties to the organization. So again, this is an example of not thinking about when they decommission something or when a company is acquisitional, really having a strategy to take custody of that information, understand what you have, because it does come back to bite you. And ironically, the elapsed time from the moment that they did the acquisition and kind of acquired these tapes to when this issue kind of bubbled up was about 18 months. So it was sitting there as a ticking time bomb for quite a bit of time. And literally these two stories that I'm telling you are horror stories in the sense, but they're quite common because rarely are people thinking about these consequences when they've got 5,000 other things to do in terms of the onboarding process or taking over these new companies on a go-forward basis. It's one of the things that falls between the cracks. And again, it's an example of what could go wrong. The next example, or next two examples actually, are kind of how things can go right and how we can help take some burden off of IT. This example is a insurance company that had had quite a bit of a history of needing to retrieve emails and other documents from a pool of email and document tapes from about a 15,000 tape pool. But they were doing constant pulls from it for litigation. What had been going on internally was, general counsel or the internal counsel would request from IT to restore certain amounts, certain emails, and it was taking literally weeks or months to be able to get anything back from IT. And it was pretty clear why. In our view, we see this a lot. IT has a day job, and that day job is to keep the company up and running and keep everything going on a day-to-day basis. And then legal's asking them to go back to a system that they no longer support, that they've got a couple of drives in the back, or maybe they have to rebuild the environment every time they get a request, and quite frankly, find somebody who has the time to do it in between windows or in between their work windows or something like that. What was happening was all the legal folks were hearing was it's taking a long time, and we can't find we can never get to the data quick enough. IT was put in an awkward position because they were being asked to do something that was not quite in their strike zone. It was highly disruptive to their day-to-day work, and both sides were extremely frustrated. I'm sure nobody on this call has ever experienced anything like that with lawyers, but you know how they can be the best customers to work with. But it was quite a tense situation, as I think one of the IT guys on this case referred to it as a tension convention with legal. It was quite hostile. So what we were able to do, what Iron Mountain and TDS were able to do, was step in and kind of relieve the pain of the IT guys and also relieve the pain of the legal folks. A lot of the work we do in terms of retrieving and restoring data from tapes is for litigation or compliance or some type of regulatory purpose. And so we spoke the language of the lawyer. We understood the issues he was having. We understood how to retrieve data on a custodian level, and we understand all that. We had the technical tools to do that and equipped to do that on a day-to-day basis. And then from IT, we were able to take the burden off of them entirely, where now we were able to take control over the whatever catalog and targeting information IT retained, we were able to take off their hands. They were able to completely decommission and get rid of all that equipment and get rid of all that floor space and repurpose all those resources for more productive day-to-day use. And effectively, we've become the provider of all the requested information that the General Counsel's office has, and it's a seamless process from the vault. The tapes are deployed right from the vault to our labs. We're able to do restore requests in days when they were taking months, and provide the business with a very reliable, predictable cost model and a delivery model. So it was one of those examples where everybody won. In this particular case, IT was extremely happy not to be being asked to do things that really didn't really wasn't in their strike zone, that they really weren't properly equipped and staffed for, and that only provided them with either disruption or or anxiety from the client. So that was an example where we were able to step in and relieve them of those burdens, and it's worked quite well. We probably do around 60 to 70 requests for them a year, and they can range from 10 tape restores all the way up to larger tape restores, hundreds of tapes for a particular matter. So this is something that's easily scaled and something that we do on a basis. The final example I wanted to show is an example of an organization, again, with doing it right and thinking proactively. This is a well-known entertainment company that has a global footprint, and they're a customer, an Iron Mountain customer for the Restoration Assurance Program, where our managed service program, where we basically take over the responsibility for certain legacy systems retrieval for them over a period of time. And we had been working with them in the U.S., and they actually, when they started to acquire some companies, somewhere in Europe, somewhere in the U.S., they actually put this program in place into the Gantt chart and the project plan for the integration. So as they were going to integrate the IT systems from these acquired companies, that this merged company that they were working with, they actually put those into into the program plan. So we were at the front end of the discussions around what needed to be preserved, what information needed to be captured before we shut everything off, before we get rid of the catalogs, before we lock the doors and close down these data centers. What do we do to make sure we've got control over this data? And now what so we're able to step in and basically take over those retrieval processes, and it made the IT integration problem much simpler, much more straightforward, much more two-dimensional than a three- or four-dimensional problem for them to take advantage of. They really, literally could think about the future from day one, and and they are quite acquisitive. They've included us on a number of occasions when they do acquisitions on the front end, to be able to make sure that we're helping them on the front end to make sure we mitigate these risks, keep the legal and the compliance people happy, and it makes this so much easier from the business perspective, and it takes all the risk out. And really, from our colleagues in IT, it helps them really focus on what is really the more complicated of the two tasks, if you think about it, which is how do we integrate these guys on the live systems on a go forward basis. And that we know that's hard enough than to have to just worry about all this legacy information, because these are systems that they didn't know, they didn't manage, they had to inherit. It's all those issues that sometimes the business would take for granted that we understand you folks have to deal with on a regular basis. So those are 4 examples of issues, and you can see kind of the good, the bad, and the ugly on that. And I think the next thing we have is a poll question. So bear with me. This is the first time I'm doing polling in the field here. So I guess the question we want to ask for you now is that have you tried to restore or access data from one of the for one of the more or more of the following types of things: an e-discovery request, a compliance audit, migrating to new technology, changing from format to another, or any type of validation of data on backup tapes from an acquisition, or other, if you tell us in the Q&A box. So I guess we'll give you a minute or so to see what we've got out there in the field. And if the moderator would just let me know when I'm supposed to go forward, I'm not. Oh, you can see it now. So it looks like the majority of you have migrated to new technology. I don't know what the other is. I can't see that on my box here. My apologies, but a good chunk of you have also had e-discovery requests, and I'm sure I'd love to ask another poll question, but it's hard to do here. But how many of the e-discovery requests have ever had any fun doing it? I'm pretty sure that's going to be about 0.0%. One of the things that we see all the time in e-discovery is nobody ever has a good e-discovery experience. It's one that most IT people like to forget or never happen again, because ultimately it's counter to what everybody does every day. So we understand that. But it also, migrating to new technology is also the other piece where we're seeing a lot of folks, they're thinking, especially if they're moving backup technology, and I noticed that was a major poll question that John asked before, a high answer on that. A lot of times, we'll have folks in IT saying, well, listen, I'm on a Legato, a Legato backup system, and we're moving to Commvault, or I'm on an Arc server and at backup, but I'm moving to TSM or something like that. Can you migrate all my tapes to that? And we kind of laugh because technically that is that's, if you actually think about it, that's almost a one of those you can't get there from here type of problems. Literally the backup tapes that are written in a particular backup format are not designed to be, if you will, ported over and read by another backup software. Theoretically, you could restore all the data, restore and then re-backup all the tapes. But if you think about it, we have some customers with hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of tapes from different from different generations and everything like that. So that's really not a practical problem or not a practical solution. So that's where what we're offering with our managed service that John will tell you about is the idea to say, you know what, leave the data where it's at, and we'll take care of the access to that information on a go-forward basis, and that frees you up, if you will, on the migration path. It gives you better options to go forward, and we're seeing a lot of customers use this because they're going to different type of maybe cloud backups or other types of backups or a new backup format, new backup software. And what's been holding them back in the past is they really didn't have a retroactive solution. They really didn't have the capability of going back to the previous system. These types of managed services that we offer allows the customer to do that, and in many cases gives them much more operational flexibility to decide on the right technology going forward. So it's an unlocker. It sounds simple. The idea is simple, but it's addressing a problem that has been around since as long as I can remember in IT in terms of the onward progression of technology. So that's my part. I'm going to hand it back over to John and go to the next phase here.
Thanks, Chris, for taking us through the good, the bad, and the ugly. So let's start to wrap it up here and draw some conclusions based on what we've heard so far. So just one more exercise here. From an IT perspective, ask yourself, based on what you've heard, if your legal team needs to satisfy the e-discovery component of a pending legal case, could you find and retrieve the data in time? And what if the answer is no, as in many cases we see that it is no? So you can lose time from driving your important business initiatives as you start doing very much your non-day job to track down that data. Operational costs to retrieve the data are extremely high. In some cases, Chris articulates that a lot of times systems are kept up and old stacks are kept up and running solely to go back and restore old data and for no other purpose whatsoever. So cost is high there. If you can't actually get the data back, fines and penalties for falling out of compliance. And finally, if the conditions are right, you can actually have your brand and your company's name on the front page of the paper for failing to come up with data in an important lawsuit. So depending on your industry or depending on where you play or how much you rely on your brand and your brand equity, that can actually be a pretty significant penalty as well for not being in position to find this data. So those are all things that we've seen over time. Both Iron Mountain and TDS together have seen them, and we're absolutely, with our managed service that I'm about to tell you about briefly, attempts to remedy. So at a very high level, what is this managed service? So we call it the Restoration Assurance Program. I won't go into really deep detail here, but the meat of the program is storing your tapes and your media with Iron Mountain such that you know where they are, you know where your tape set is, you don't have to sort through them or ship them across the country or anywhere else once you actually have one of these events. So the tapes are where you expect them to be safely with Iron Mountain. And then when you actually do have one of these events, whether it's a litigation event or a technology change or whatever it is, all you have to do is pick up the phone and call Iron Mountain, and we go to TDS, who manages the catalogs and basically has a map of where your data is, where your custodians are on those tapes, pick the subset of the tapes to restore from. Right? So basically it's a managed service that includes tape vaulting, maintenance of the catalogs, and then actual restoration from a subset of your tapes. The idea is that this is very easy. Instead of a firefight between legal and IT, it's a phone call that says, hey, I need John's or I need Chris's emails from December 3rd, 2007. We very quickly identify the tapes and get the data back to you in a repeatable, defensible, auditable, cost-predictable way. Right? So the burden's off the IT team. Legal gets the data that they need. You meet your litigation and compliance requests on time. Again, it's repeatable, auditable, defensible. And overall, it takes risk off of all parts of the organization, whether it's a business or legal or IT. So really, you can reduce time, cost, and overall effort and pain associated with restoration of legacy data by employing a program like this. So that's really how we've seen a lot of our customers benefit from this, and really the reason we wanted to get in front of you folks today to talk more about these practices. So with that, I think we've wound up. That's the end of the planned presentation. I know that we do have a Q&A section here where Chris and I will be happy to take any questions that you have and respond as best we can and hopefully provide some value.
All right, great. Let's take some some of these questions. And guys, just a reminder, if we aren't able to get to your questions, we will follow up with you offline. First question, what tape formats do you support?
Well, it helps if I take the phone off mute. Well, it's literally anything that's been around for the last 25 to 30 years. We literally go back to 9-track to 7-track all the way through all the DLT formats, LTO formats, the 4mm and 8mm formats. We literally have in our warehouses, thousands of tape drives that we've acquired and maintained over the years. But I would say that it's also beyond just having the drives. It's really the combination of also the tools and the processes. So we have all of our own tools to be able to restore the actual physical data on the tape. Instead of, so it's beyond just having the drives, but that's a big part of it. And the other thing that we deal a lot of, especially when you're dealing with high volume type work, like we talked about with the 30,000 tapes, cataloging 30,000 tapes is a non-trivial process. We are currently running a project now that involves a remediation of 90,000 Lotus Notes tapes. We have about 300 drives working on that project every day. So, it's a lot of scale that you have to worry about. And it's also not, it really isn't comparable to what most people would have in their own IT shop to be able to, that they have this laying around in spare time to deploy.
All right, great. How can I prepare for data restore from e-discovery request or legal hold?
Say the first part again, please.
How can I prepare for a data restores from e-discovery request or legal holds?
Well, I'm going to give you I'll give you the inside secret here, guys. That it's to quote Yogi Berra, effective retrieval for e-discovery is 90% of the technical restoration. The other 90% is actually knowing and maintaining where everything is. The fundamental problem that most IT shops face is, when they did their job, they backed up systems and servers, to a particular set of tapes or streams of tapes or fragments of tapes. Primarily back in the day, it was for disaster recovery purposes, and they really don't back up individual people, or they don't think about at the user level. You back up things, you back up stuff, you back up systems and systems of systems. So it's an e-discovery request is by definition relatively narrow. I'm looking for John and Fred and Amy's email of these particular days. So the targeting information, remembering the targeting, or which is more than just the catalog information if you have it, that's really critical. The actual executing the restore is its own set of issues, in terms of, having the, if you're doing it internally, having the right software, having the right version of software, having the target server to restore to, those are all complicated, but the real killer is actually remembering where you put everything, and that is what we spend most of our time mitigating, to be honest with you. Because from our perspective, the actual execution of the technical restore of the tape is stuff that we can do on our own because we have the equipment and the tools that we've developed and do it. It's really finding the needle to be able to restore the needle in the haystack.
All right, great. Why should I outsource data restoration instead of handling it internally?
Well, that's a good question, and it depends on who you're asking or who's doing the asking. If you are running an IT shop, you got to ask yourself, do I need to maintain this, this capability? Where we're seeing a lot of people, essentially micro-outsourcing this to, micro-outsourcing these tasks are people who have their hands full with their day job, who've moved to new technologies, who've consolidated data centers, who've, got a lot more things to manage than they did even 5 years ago, right? We know your life isn't getting simpler. So the folks that really want to, the folks that we're finding that are open and very much interested in these types of services are looking to save money, but more from an IT perspective, it's to save hassle. Like I said, this is a complicated, difficult process. Generally, IT hates them. They tend, because it doesn't play to your strengths. It's not something that is usually very disruptive. It gets in the way of your day job. So there are some IT organizations that have the machines and have the systems, and they're fine. I mean, if maybe they don't have a lot of them, and they're happy to do that. But more and more customers are changing their platforms and getting and moving to the platforms and creating more legacy platforms that are even more difficult to kind of manage retroactively. So that's really the issue. It's not that it's not that it can't be done by IT, but it doesn't play necessarily to the strengths of IT. And quite frankly, it's in many cases it's a no-win scenario for IT. This is really, it's not a in many cases it's not a terribly fair request. That we see. It usually doesn't end well. But again, it's not for everybody, but most of the folks are seeing, especially those that are seeing a lot of technology change, it allows you to focus your precious resources on what's really important on a day-to-day basis. And I'd add one more thing. From a budgetary perspective, or those holding the budgets, one of the things that we're seeing that's very helpful for IT is it gets this cost off their back. And normally our customers, or the budgeting customers that we tend to work with, are the folks that are required to retrieve the data. So your legal compliance, regulatory people, or the business. So sometimes we're actually able to relieve precious resources in IT.
All right. Why choose a data restoration program over an on-demand data registration program? I'm sorry, project.
So, Chris, you want me to go first here so you can rest your voice and jump in? I know you've gotten the last three here. So from the Iron Mountain perspective, joining the program or setting up a program puts you in position exactly when the event occurs or when the data is needed to be primed at the pump and ready to go and initiate the restoration. You don't have to fumble with getting the tapes from your own site all together, finding the right tapes, sending them somewhere. Trying to figure out exactly how long it's going to take, making sure you have the catalog, or potentially having to regenerate the catalog. Basically under the restoration program or a program like this, you do all that work sort of up front and you're ready to go when the event hits, right? So it's sort of protecting yourself or assuring yourself up front, right? So you get predictable pricing, you get an SLA that's worked into an SOW, and you're basically ready to go at the pickup of the phone, right? The phone call happens and you're in business. So it also allows you, to Chris's earlier point, it allows you to really retire some of those old systems that you might have sitting around to do the restores yourself, because you're not sort of doing it as a firefight project. You've made the conscious decision to outsource this issue or outsource this problem, and you're going forward with confidence on that direction. So it really makes things a lot smoother to be on a program. One of the things that we see quite a bit of actually is customers who will come with the firefight project, and when that's done, they'll say, "Man, that was great having you guys do this for us. Like, can we sign up for a program?" It's like, of course, yeah, you can. That'll make everything even better. So we really focus on doing the best for the customer, and it often leads naturally into recurring programs. So, Chris, I'll leave it at that, and you tell me where I went wrong.
Right. Well, but no, absolutely dead on point. The answer that we see most is number one is it's generally going to cost you a lot less per incident or per retrieval to be able to deliver and restore data within the program. Why? Because we've taken the risk out. We know exactly where everything is. We're taking responsibility for the targeting and the management and the capability of maintaining the capability. The time to respond is much more efficient. The one thing that again I would stress to you that really adds to the risk is maintaining the targeting and the information. So, we have some folks that, okay, well, I'll just keep my database, my net backup database, and I'll just keep that online somehow, and then I'll use it for the program. Well, the older that gets, the more risky that gets, the more you ignore it, in between events, the more risk you inject. And ultimately it comes down to, as John said, about 60% of our managed service customers have had ad hoc events. And generally, the reaction on when an event is done goes something like this. Boy, that was really, really hard. I don't want to do that ever again. Because they couldn't find the data. They didn't have any procedures in place. It took a lot of people, even to support us, to be able to do the restore, to find the data. It's quite disruptive. And that's generally why people went ahead and say, just get it off my back. Because, unless you're a glutton for punishment, this is not fun. and it also gets in the way primarily of your precious resources to do your day job. I've walked through data centers where they've got the they've got the legacy environments in the back of the room when there's nothing else in the data center and they have post-it notes that say don't turn off, because if they turn that off, they know that there's no way for them to retrieve that catalog, or they'll never be able to get that system up and running. I mean, those are just unacceptable risks in today's world, and that's a lot of what goes on, and we understand that. So I think that it really you'll have to look at this from a risk perspective as the biggest answer to that question.
All right, great. Let's see. We moved off Exchange to Office 365. Can you restore email boxes from an Exchange server backup if we no longer have that Exchange server?
Oh, absolutely. That's the majority of what we do. So if you've got Exchange server backups and EDBs onto tape, that's about 90% of what we do every day.
Great. So you mentioned you can restore tapes, but what about other mediums such as CDs, DVDs, zip drives, etc.?
Yeah, we actually do a lot of work with opticals and worm disks and stuff like that. So yes, data can be recovered from pretty much any magnetic media. Our core, what we do most of, is obviously anything written to tape, which is usually in some type of archive format. But yes, any real data is readable.
All right. Rick wants to know if we will ever get rid of tapes.
Well, so that's actually an interesting one. Yeah, no, I will. So we, Iron Mountain stores, I think, about 90 million tapes globally, and it's extremely durable business for us. And in fact, our storage of tapes continues to increase. So, I don't think tape is going away anytime soon. I think people are using tape for different things today than they used it for in the past. So, for example, doing daily backups to tape is not something that we see happen that frequently, but we know that people are using tape as an archival mechanism, whether de facto saving the old backups as an archive or starting to move into dedicated, well-formatted, I'll say, archives with LTFS and other things like that. So some of the data that we have through various analyst groups actually tells us, if you look at LTO tapes, about 20 million LTO cartridges are sold per year. Now, the rate is going down at about 3% per year, I would say. Don't quote me, but about 3% down per year. But when you think that 20 million were sold in 2015, that goes down 3%. Okay, sure. So almost 20 million are going to be sold in 2016, right? So there's still a whole bunch of tapes being sold globally. And by the way, as the generation of LTO moves up from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, the capacity on each tape goes up and up and up and up, right? So the capacity shift from an LTO perspective is, if you look at that graph, it's going straight up, and the cost point, the price point of the actual media is not going in that direction. It's staying relatively flat. So what that basically says is more and more people are storing more and more data on tape at a very competitive price point, especially for archiving. So I think from the Iron Mountain perspective, tape is changing, but I really don't see it going away anytime soon.
We've been going out of the tape business for 30 years, so we watch this space very carefully. I agree with everything John said, and the one thing that, if you read between the statistics he just gave you, is more data is being written to tape today than ever before. I'll say that again. More data is being written to tape today than ever before. John is absolutely right. It's for a different purpose. Gone are the days when you're making your overnight backups and all the gyrations you used to go through to do those nightly backups and all the basically the arms race you used to do to buy new software that multiplexes and higher capacity tapes to be able to write more and more data in the same backup window. Those days are gone. But as an archive asset, it is still the cheapest way and the most secure way, I would say, to store and preserve information and data. I mean, don't believe all the hype. Backup tape ain't dead; it ain't even sleeping. And we see a lot of folks actually going back to very smart hybrid applications of tape technology. And the reason that people hate tape was because because when it was a disaster recovery asset, right? It was because it was hard, it was difficult, and I think that's the biggest reason people hate tape. And I think that you're starting to see, and you'll start to see over the next couple of years, that going back to a more pure play archive asset and a much simpler, easier technical function.
All right, fantastic, guys. So it looks like we're all out of questions. Thank y'all so much for that awesome presentation. Do y'all have any final words for our audience?
This is John. I'd just like to thank everyone again for taking the time to listen today to Iron Mountain and TDS tell you about some of the things we've seen in the data management space and in restoration. It's clearly a place that can be problematic for many organizations, but with the right program in place, it's not something we can't help you dig out of or that you can't dig out of. So just thanks for your time and attention. It was great. It was fun.
Yeah, I would just add very much thank you for your time and attention, and we feel your pain. We know what you do every day, and I think that if there's ever anything we can do for you, please don't hesitate to call us.
All right, thanks so much, guys. Hopefully everybody was able to learn just a bit more. I do want to remind everyone that if you had to step out or miss any part of this presentation, you'll be getting an email in just a few days with a link to view the webinar on demand. Special thanks to Iron Mountain for creating today's content and sponsoring this great event, and thanks to each and every one of you for tuning in today. We hope to see you back soon for another Spiceworks Partner webinar. But until then, stay safe and keep it spicy.